The most Googled athlete in the world was Mahomes. It was LeBron. It wasn't even Steph. It was a rookie quarterback that 31 NFL teams didn't want. And when the spotlight hit him the brightest, his own coach pulled him off the field. Was it sabotage, politics, or something deeper that nobody's willing to say out loud? Because what happened next wasn't just shocking. It exposed an entire machine working behind the scenes. Shadur Sanders didn't just survive the hate, he crushed it. With his arm, his numbers, and his silence. But the story here isn't just about football. It's about image, power, and what happens when someone refuses to let the league write their script. And when Coach Prime, Deion Sanders himself, finally responded, he didn't hold back. The lies got torched. And the truth, it was louder than anybody expected. It started with whispers. Subtle comments, anonymous sources, and media spin that almost felt coordinated. They weren't criticizing his stats because those were solid. They weren't focused on his work ethic because there was no proof it lacked. Instead, they went for something deeper, his character. Suddenly, Shadur Sanders wasn't just a young QB trying to prove himself. He was the subject of reports claiming he couldn't connect with teammates, that he sat in the back during meetings, that his arm was weak, and his IQ wasn't high enough to run a real NFL offense. And just like that, a rising rookie became a target in a conversation that wasn't even about gameplay anymore. None of it added up. This wasn't some walk-on backup clinging to a roster spot. This was a player raised inside the game, mentored by greatness, and built for pressure. But somehow, the narrative stuck. And once planted, it spread. What made it worse was how quiet the narrative was at first. It didn't come with dramatic headlines or direct quotes. It came packaged as doubt. Those vague, hard-to-disprove lines like concerns within the organization, or scouts reportedly questioning. No sources, no evidence, just enough smoke to let everything look like fire. By the time the season started, Shadur wasn't even practicing with the first team. No reps with starters. No timing with the guys he'd be playing with when games actually counted. Name another rookie QB drafted as the future of a franchise who didn't get a single first-team snap before their debut. You can't, because this doesn't happen. Not unless it's on purpose. And then came the comparisons. Analysts started hyping up Dillon Gabriel as a smarter, more efficient field general. They pushed Shedeur into this false frame of being raw talent without leadership. Somehow a guy with 3 years of college dominance and NFL bloodlines was now less ready than quarterbacks who couldn't even match his production in weaker divisions. But the worst part, once those claims got out into the media cycle, fans believed them. Suddenly, Shedeur was fighting against a version of himself that didn't exist. Coaches won't say it. Front offices won't admit it. But the NFL has always had a type. Quiet, predictable, controllable, a mold. Shedeur didn't fit that. He's flashy, confident, focused, and comfortable knowing he doesn't owe anybody an apology for who he is. That rubbed the wrong people the wrong way. Instead of embracing that competitor mentality, they twisted it into arrogance. Instead of praising his poise, they questioned his ego. Instead of celebrating how he carried himself, they painted it as a problem. But what nobody expected was how fast those lies would fall apart once the games started. With only a few weeks to prepare, no chemistry with starting receivers, and no trust from a coaching staff clearly playing favorites, Shedeur walked onto the NFL field for his debut and lit it up. He didn't show nerves. He showed control. He didn't look lost. He looked like he had been studying for this moment his entire life. 364 yards, 4 total touchdowns. A highlight reel of tight window throws and clutch reads that immediately made every single pre-draft narrative look ridiculous. All the so-called red flags, couldn't even see them on tape. And that was when everything changed. Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, had been silent through most of this, not because he didn't care. He was watching, taking notes, doing what smart people do when people lie about those they love, waiting for the moment that truth speaks louder than spin. That moment came when the world saw Shedeur cook. That's when Prime reposted the receipts. The actual post called out every lie and quoted them one by one. Poor study habits, a lie. Weak arm, a hell of a lie. Sits at the back of meetings, flat out false. Lacks the IQ to lead an NFL offense better than Gabriel, not even close. And you could feel the tone shift. Deion didn't whisper. He shouted through facts. He didn't name call or speculate. He posted truth and let the rest unravel on its own. Coaches who made backroom comments suddenly went quiet. Commentators who repeated gossip started backpedaling. And fans, they started Googling. That's when it got scary for the people up top. Because what was supposed to be a quiet little PR machine, subtle character damage to keep a quarterback in his place, had officially blown up in front of tens of millions watching across the country. The numbers Shedeur posted weren't just good. They were undeniable. The only thing more viral than his highlights was the wave of support he got after Deion dropped the truth bomb. Analysts started changing their tone. Maybe the criticism was unfair. He showed more poise than we expected. He's a legitimate problem for defenses. It was too late. The media machine had already been caught pushing lies that couldn't survive the tape. And the scariest part for some people in the league, this was only his third start. There was no injury. No attitude problem. No real football reason to bench him in the critical moment of that game, which left fans and some insiders realizing something uncomfortable. Maybe they didn't want him to win in the first place. And that's where things really started getting ugly. When that game started, nobody expected it to be the one that flipped the entire conversation. For most rookie quarterbacks, people watch looking for mistakes. The pressure isn't just to perform, it's to survive. And for Shadur Sanders, that pressure was heavier than almost anyone realized. No first-team reps, no real system support, no grace period. He was told to sink or swim without gear, without rhythm, and with every excuse already loaded in the chamber waiting to explain away his failure. But then, he didn't fail. Not even close. From the opening drive, it was clear something was different. The way he scanned the field, the tempo he played with, the chemistry that shouldn't have even been there considering how little time he got to build it. None of it made sense, unless you had actually been paying attention to who Shedeur was all along. He didn't force throws, didn't panic under pressure, didn't lose control. He looked calm, surgical even. Every snap told a different version of the story that had been sold about him for months. And everyone watching knew it, including the people who had pushed the lies in the first place. He threw for 364 total yards, ran a touchdown in, and dropped dimes like he had been in the league for 5 seasons. His precision on intermediate throws kept drives alive. His deep ball touched the sky, then fell right into hands like it was scripted. Jerry Jeudy pulled in a clean 60-yard bomb that had everybody's jaw on the floor, not because it was surprising for him, but because they had just been told this kid didn't have the arm for this level. Every myth they used to bury his stock started crumbling in real time. He didn't just look like he belonged. He looked like he owned the moment. That performance should have been the moment where the storyline flipped entirely. But instead, the coaching staff made a decision that sucked all the air out of the stadium. Late in the game, down by 2, the Browns needed a crucial 2-point conversion. Momentum had completely shifted. Shedeur had just led a comeback, was torching the defense. He had the offense moving like a machine. And then out of nowhere, they pulled him, just like that. Their rookie quarterback, their franchise investment, their most productive player that night was sitting on the sideline, watching someone else attempt to win the game. Nobody in the building could make sense of it. Fans were stunned. Analysts didn't understand what they were seeing. Social media exploded with confusion, but it was Shannon Sharpe's reaction that truly exposed how wild and possibly intentional this entire moment was. He didn't mince words. He straight up questioned whether the Browns were trying to sabotage their own quarterback. "I don't want to call it sabotage," he said, "but how do you bench a guy who's lighting the field up like a video game?" That was when eyes started turning to Kevin Stefanski, the Browns head coach. In a post-game presser, a reporter asked him directly, "What happened on that final 2-point play?" Stefanski dodged the question and gave some boilerplate response about things not going as planned. Then came the real question, "Did you make that call?" This time, Stefanski didn't dodge. He said, "I make every call." And just like that, it got even messier. Because people already knew Stefanski had been delegating play, calling duties to another coach recently, Tommy Rees. So if Stefanski was calling everything again, that meant this decision came from the top. If he wasn't calling the plays, then he had just thrown his entire staff under the bus. Either way, it created a firestorm. Shannon Sharpe took it up a notch. He said he had spoken personally with 2 of his former NFL coaches, 2 men with years of big league experience. He asked them straight up, "What situation justifies pulling your hottest quarterback from a must-convert play?" According to Shannon, both coaches either stayed silent or couldn't justify it. They wouldn't even try to explain it. Because how do you explain something that doesn't make football sense? A rookie QB playing like a vet, carrying your offense, finding his rhythm, and you take the ball out of his hands with the game on the line. It raised one question louder than all the rest. Did they ever want him to succeed? The numbers, the performance, the leadership, it should have erased all doubt. But what it exposed instead was how deep the resistance ran. Even when he played perfectly, it still wasn't enough to earn full trust. That decision didn't just look like poor coaching. It looked deliberate. And when the smoke cleared, it was obvious what the league was now dealing with, not just a talented rookie, but a culture breaker. Someone who wasn't afraid to be himself. Someone raised by a man who built his career defying the mold. Someone who refused to play small for anyone's comfort. That fire, that grit, that loyalty, it all showed in the way Shedeur responded after the game. No attacks, no blame, just class. But Deion, he wasn't staying quiet anymore. He started reposting clip after clip, calling out lie after lie, exposing everyone who helped shape the narrative against his son. The messages landed hard. Not just because they were emotional, but because they had receipts. And the scariest part of all, this was just the beginning. The days that followed weren't quiet, they were chaotic. Social media didn't simmer down, it blew up even more. Fans were outraged, NFL players started speaking up, and analysts didn't hold back. And while everyone debated what really happened that night, Deion Sanders made it crystal clear, this wasn't just a bad call. This was something deeper, something personal. That's when the conversation shifted. Because when a seasoned coach makes a questionable decision, people usually argue excess and O's. When it happens repeatedly, and always against one player, the narrative changes. It stops being about strategy and starts sounding like a setup. Reports from sources like Heavycom dropped a bombshell. Coach Prime had visited the Browns facility in the days leading up to that game. Not for show, not for press. He came to see what his son was walking into. That visit didn't calm concerns, it confirmed them. Everything Shedeur had dealt with since training camp suddenly came into focus. From the beginning, whispers said the organization didn't want him to start. That no matter how well he played, he'd be stuck behind veterans and treated like a long-term project instead of someone who could help the team win right now. But after 3 games, it was painfully obvious. The rookie was outperforming every expectation and blowing those excuses straight into the dirt. And yet, the behavior from inside the organization didn't change. Shedeur had been delivering NFL-level performances without NFL-level support. No real rapport with starters. No consistency in play calling. Zero momentum allowed to build week to week. And even worse, zero trust in critical moments, no matter how many times he proved himself. It was like they were more scared of what he might accomplish than interested in helping him do it. Cam Newton said what everyone was thinking but didn't want to say out loud. This feels like sabotage. And for once, no one argued. Even analysts who'd been defending the coaching staff started walking back their takes. The excuses didn't hold up anymore. They saw the same thing we all saw, what looked like a calculated effort to limit their own quarterback rather than lift him. And the pattern was bigger than just one play or 1 week. Shedeur hadn't been given the benefit of the doubt at any point. From the draft to training camp to every locker room leak that labeled him difficult, distant, and over. But instead of shifting support towards him, the staff doubled down. Even after becoming the most talked about player on social media, even after drawing national attention for his numbers, even after helping the team rally from 14 down, they still yanked him when it mattered most. This wasn't about football anymore. It was about control, image, and quieting someone who refused to shrink, because Shedeur wasn't humble in the way they wanted him to be. He wasn't interested in sitting quiet while his name got dragged, and he wasn't afraid to play with confidence, even when every inch of progress had to be carved out through resistance. That, more than anything else, is what seemed to terrify the establishment. Not just his talent, his presence, his refusal to break. He didn't pretend to be grateful just for being allowed in the room. He wasn't scared to walk in with expectations. He wasn't just trying to belong, he wanted to lead. And that's when every attack against him started to make sense, because this isn't about a quarterback making mistakes and needing development. This was about a star being dimmed on purpose, one decision at a time. When Shannon Sharpe grilled Kevin Stefanski live, asking him to explain why he'd make that call in that moment, people expected a football reason. A coverage mismatch, a protection concern, something. What they got instead? Vagueness, deflection. Stefanski couldn't defend it without making himself look worse. He was either lying about who made the decision or lying about the reason behind it. Either way, Shannon pressed. You've got your quarterback cooking down 2, the game's on the line, and you take the ball out of his hands. No explanation made sense. That moment exploded into something bigger than just a coaching error. It became a symbol of everything Shedeur had been fighting since he entered the league, being overlooked, doubted, and dismissed before he even had a fair shot. It was easy to see it now. This wasn't one bad call. It was a pattern. Repeated decisions that came at crucial moments, all of them suppressing momentum, all of them undercutting the guy who looked like the only thing going right on offense. And still, Shedeur didn't flinch. After the game, he was asked about the play, about being pulled, about the decision to trust someone else for the game-winning moment. His response? Calm, measured, almost too mature for a guy being openly disrespected. "If I'm out there, of course I always want the ball in my hands," he said. "But that's not what football is. Sometimes you run the ball, sometimes you kick a field goal. I'll never go against the call." No anger, no blame, no drama, just leadership. And that right there, that restraint, that discipline said more than any press release ever could. Because if it were anyone else, any other young quarterback, the media would be celebrating that poise. They'd be cheering the maturity, praising the selflessness, applauding the growth. But not here, not this time. And maybe it's because Shedeur broke the script. Maybe it's because he refused to be painted into their narrative. Maybe it's because they knew, if he ever got a real chance, they couldn't stop him. And now that he's here, with the lies exposed, the highlights trending, the fire building, they're running out of ways to hold him back. But they haven't given up. Not yet. Because the next move they make might be the most desperate one yet. When Coach Prime finally made his move, it wasn't subtle. Deion Sanders didn't go into some media press tour or wave the issue away with an empty soundbite. He went straight to the public, reposting the dirt that had been thrown at his son, not to complain about it, but to burn it to the ground. Line by line, lie by lie, name by name, he didn't drop vague opinions. He posted real quotes from anonymous NFL sources and headlines that had circulated for months. And next to each one, he let the film speak for itself. Poor study habits? False. Can't connect with teammates? Debunked. Sits at the back of meetings. No footage, no proof, never happened. Weak arm? Play the game tape. Lacks football IQ compared to Dylan Gabriel? That narrative didn't survive 5 minutes once the stats hit the timeline. The way Deion laid it all out wasn't just for drama, it was methodical and emotional. It was a father fighting a campaign that had been trying to bury his son in plain sight. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He exposed. And that exposure hit hard because people were now looking at everything with fresh eyes. The same folks who shrugged off those early season NFL rumors were now digging back through clips, looking closer, realizing just how thin the evidence had always been. Most of the same accusations that were used to push Shedeur down on draft day were never backed by anything other than vague whispers and lazy comparisons. But Deion was done letting other people define his son. In his post, he made it personal, not just as a coach defending a player, but as a father defending his child. He said, "A weaker man would have folded under this pressure." That wasn't hyperbole. That was real. Because the truth was most would have. Any other rookie, placed under that microscope, constantly tested without support, gaslit by leadership, and then benched after delivering would have cracked. But not Shedeur. That Deion explained was the part nobody outside the family really understood. This went past touchdowns and stat sheets. It was emotional, it was spiritual. It was, as he put it, bigger than me, bigger than football. He said, God has the final say, not man. Then he closed it with a quiet bombshell. Now the results are visible. And they were. The moment his truth started trending, online traffic proved it louder than any speech ever could. In a season where NFL legends were still dominating headlines, Mahomes, Brady to retirement rumors, trade debate drama, Shadur Sanders became the most Googled athlete on earth. Not just in football, not just among rookies, period. He passed Steph Curry, LeBron James, Patrick Mahomes, all of them gone from the top spot. And right under his name, Shadur Sanders, Deion's other son, ranked near the top as well. In a sport built on old systems, quiet compliance, and the idea that rookies need to wait their turn, the Sanders family had flipped the script. But the real power of that moment wasn't rankings or trending topics. It was the fact that millions of people finally saw the agenda for what it really was. The NFL had a future star right in front of their face, but 31 teams passed him over, generating more attention than any player in their system. Suddenly, those same teams, the ones that ignored the tape and focused on character attacks, were now facing fans asking, "How did you miss this?" And the teams that did take a chance on him, they were left trying to explain why he wasn't being used like the star he clearly was. That's where things started to get uglier. Because once the numbers couldn't be denied and the excuses stopped working, the last curveball people threw was the distraction narrative. You know the one. The idea that being in the spotlight makes you a problem. That personality equals ego, and ego equals risk. But again, the receipts didn't lie. Shedeur hadn't created a single locker room problem. Not one teammate had stepped forward to question his leadership. In fact, players were coming out to defend him, pointing to his dedication, attention to detail, and the way he owns his mistakes without finger pointing. And still, after all that, the attacks didn't stop. That's when Deion's fire turned to clarity. In an interview days after the Cleveland disaster, he went deeper. "I know stuff behind the curtain," he said. "That's why I don't just give football advice, I give life advice. Because Shedeur is dealing with things most people never see." And thank God he was built for it, because the pressure, it's real. He didn't lay out every detail. He didn't point fingers with names attached, but the message was honest and heavy. There was more going on, more than politics, more than football. A pattern of pressure rooted not in performance, but in who Shedeur was, how he carried himself, and the impact he had just by refusing to fold. Coach Prime called his son a franchise quarterback, not just for talent, but for character. Temperament, confidence without arrogance, faith without fear. And when the media had turned on that narrative, Deion refused to let them flip the truth, because this wasn't a redemption arc. This was surveillance of a rising star, not because he made mistakes, but because he dared to shine before they said it was time. And now that moment had passed. Shedeur didn't need to grab headlines. He became the headline, and the NFL machine couldn't spin that back. But what happened next? That would determine whether this was just a viral highlight moment or the start of something so much bigger than even football can contain. By this point, fans weren't just angry, they were starting to connect the dots. What had started as a one-time head-scratcher during a two-point play had now exposed a season-long pattern, one that no longer looked accidental. One analyst on the panel said out loud what too many people were already thinking. The Browns never wanted Shedeur to be their starter. Not because he didn't have the talent, but because if he did succeed, they'd lose control of the narrative. And that's when everything began to shift from suspicion to something closer to truth. This wasn't one coaching mistake. This was a string of decisions, timed just right, that all pointed in the same direction: limit his reps, take him out during momentum, keep leadership in the hands of trusted veterans, and then spin quiet stories about off-field concerns, knowing full well that once those whispers hit the media, they'd spread like wildfire. But here's the reality that scared them the most. Even with those hurdles, Shedeur still forced his way onto the field with pure ability. Numbers that didn't just match what was expected, they blew it out of the water. And with each performance, the excuses stopped working. That's when the resistance grew louder. Suddenly, every successful game was followed by a strange leak, a new rumor, a new concern, not about his play, but about his attitude. Preparedness. Fit. But none of it held water, because none of it showed up on film. One analyst summed it up in one sentence: "This doesn't feel like football anymore. It feels like a battle for who gets to control the spotlight." Because let's be clear, for some people in the league, it wasn't enough for Shedeur to play well. He was supposed to wait his turn. He was supposed to be low profile, invisible, a quiet rookie who took the blame but not the credit. Somebody they could mold. Instead, they got a quarterback who already knew who he was and had no interest in apologizing for it. And that's when something bigger started to form. The theory that maybe this wasn't just about development or play style. Maybe it really was about image, about power. About sending a message, one that said, "We'll decide how far you go, not your talent." Some fans even started revisiting draft day footage. They noticed how careful studio analysts were being when talking about Shedeur pre-draft. Terms like potential distraction and media presence made their way in, as if confidence and visibility were somehow red flags. What made it worse? His numbers dwarfed guys picked ahead of him by a wide margin. In just his third start, Shedeur had produced more yards, more scoring drives, and a higher completion percentage than some quarterbacks who were handed the keys to the franchise without question. And yet, he still had to fight just to get first-team practice reps. It was only a theory at first. But then came the insiders, former players, retired coaches, NFL vets. And more than one of them echoed the exact same thing. They're not playing him because they're afraid of what he might prove. Whether it was Cam Newton saying it was sabotage, Shannon Sharpe calling it malpractice, or Skip Bayless posting live rants over it, the consensus grew stronger with every game. This wasn't about readiness. It was about relevance. Shadur's performance was starting to outgrow the hand selected for him. He wasn't the side story anymore, he was the headline. And not just on the field. Every clip, every highlight, every clean post-game quote went viral. This wasn't just a player doing well. This was a brand forming in real time, and that level of influence, unapproved and unscripted, doesn't sit well with certain people in high places. Eventually, moments started stacking up. Too many to ignore. Promising offensive drives suddenly ended with conservative play calling not suited to Shedur's strengths. Red zone decisions made no sense. Timeout usage that killed momentum. Clock mismanagement that stalled fourth-quarter rallies. To most people watching, it looked sloppy. To some, it started to look intentional. And that's when speculation turned into ugly rumors that maybe the team was willing to sacrifice short-term wins to preserve the long-term image of the franchise. That if Shedeur played too well too soon, it would embarrass the same people who had kept him glued to the bench. The word tanking started getting thrown around. And while no team ever admits it, the evidence kept building. Strategic missteps, undeniable talent being sidelined, a system breaking down every time he got hot. For a team that claimed to be searching for answers, they didn't seem very interested in the one staring them in the face under center. And through it all, Shedeur stayed professional. No complaints, no cryptic tweets, just film, just stats, just proof. That, more than anything, is what made the story impossible to ignore. Because even if it wasn't true, even if the coaching decisions were just poorly timed or coincidental, they had created the exact pattern that proved every theory right. And the worst part? They created it live in front of millions. The NFL is an institution known for controlling narrative. Coaches protect players. Organizations control access. Leaks are managed. But in this case, nothing could be contained. Not the viral clips, not Coach Prime's outrage, and definitely not the internet sleuths dissecting every missed opportunity. They say pressure reveals character. Well, this pressure revealed two things. It revealed a team willing to play games with a young black quarterback who wouldn't stay in their box, and it revealed a player who just kept showing up despite the politics, despite the media lies, despite the benchings and the shifting narratives. He never cracked. Up until this point, there had always been a sliver of doubt, a space where arguments still lived. People could say it wasn't sabotage, just bad judgment. That maybe Stefanski made the wrong calls but didn't mean to. That maybe the media got it twisted, and the front office had its own timeline for Shedur's development. But then, the contradictions started to pile up. And this time, they weren't coming from fans, they were coming straight out of the coach's mouth. During the brutal post-game conference, after benching Shedeur during what could have been a game-winning 2-point conversion, Stefanski was pressed about the decision. And when he answered, he stepped directly into a trap. When he was asked who made the call on that play, his response was fast, almost like he'd practiced it. "I make every call." It sounded confident, absolute, final, until NFL insiders started reminding people that just days earlier, Stefanski had reportedly handed over play calling duties to his assistant, Tommy Rees. The switch had been covered, public record. Media outlets had reported it, so which version was true? Was he calling the plays, or just covering for someone else's mistake? It couldn't be both. And that answer, right there, sent everything into a spiral. Analysts didn't sweep it under the rug. They spotlighted it. Because this wasn't just a bad football decision, it was a coaching staff caught scrambling to explain something that made no sense. The 2-point conversion wasn't just any play. It was the moment. The culmination of a comeback engineered by Shedeur practically on his own. The energy was shifting, the defense was reeling, and then suddenly the guy who had led every step of the drive was watching from the sideline. And the guy replacing him had not thrown a single pass all day. It would be ridiculous in college. But in the NFL, it was unthinkable. That's the moment when the real wave started, not just from fans or talking heads, but from former players. Guys who'd been in that huddle. Guys who had lived through 2-minute drills, who knew what trust looked like and what sabotage felt in you pull. That's the moment teams build legacies on. That's when careers get stamped. And instead of trusting that, they subbed in a decoy. Like it was a trick play from a high school highlight reel. But this wasn't high school, this was the league. And they didn't just pull Shedeur from a chance at a win, they pulled him from history. What came next was even more unsettling. Analysts began reviewing the entire season, not just that one play. And what they found looked less like coaching errors and more like strategic isolation. Delayed starts despite strong camp numbers, drastically limited media exposure, frequent position group changes midweek, confusing red zone usage. Even in his best performances, there was always a catch, always a reason to minimize, never celebrate. Then came the question nobody wanted to ask, but everyone was thinking, were they actively trying to suppress him? One former QB put it this way: sometimes the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. From inside the locker room, reports began surfacing of growing division. That certain veterans supported Shedeur behind the scenes but didn't feel empowered to speak publicly. That team leadership was split between letting him lead or keeping him in check. That coaches were walking a tightrope, trying not to let the truth spill into chaos. But chaos was already here. NFL fans aren't stupid. They see when a player doesn't get support. They know when a quarterback is being set up for failure. And by this point, all Stefanski's vague answers were doing was confirming those suspicions. Shannon Sharpe called it as clear as anyone had. You trust a man to bring you back from 14 down, but you don't trust him to finish the job? The logic didn't work. The spin was breaking apart. And as the mask came off, people started noticing how easy it had been for the media to twist things before. How quick those pre-draft critiques were to question Shedeur's ego, his priorities, his style. None of them stuck once he started playing. But instead of adjusting the narrative, many sports outlets just shifted their tone, using softer words to mean the same thing. Now they were scrambling for new angles. Shedeur isn't being handled properly, or the coaching staff might be making decisions based on internal pressure. None of them admitted what most people already knew. The media had carried that water too. They repeated the leaks. They posted the tweets. They pushed the idea that maybe he was the problem, even when every piece of evidence said otherwise. And in the middle of it all, Shedeur stayed Shedeur. No accusations, no blame, just performance. He never posted a cryptic caption, never subtweeted Stefanski, never threw a teammate under the bus. His response to being pulled in a game-winning drive was, "I'll never go against the play call." That is what made it worse for the people trying to contain him. Because humility like that, backed by dominance on the field, becomes undeniable. No amount of rumors can compete with presence, with grace under fire, with letting the scoreboard expose the lies while you stay silent. What this section of the story proved wasn't just that Shadur Sanders was being mismanaged. It proved that every person who tried to downplay him, every so-called insider who fed the wrong idea, was officially out of answers. If pulling the trigger on that one terrible call had been an isolated mistake, the story would have faded out. Instead, they exposed themselves. And now there was nowhere left to hide. When the dust finally settled around the two-point disaster, everyone waited for Shadur Sanders to snap. Press, fans, analysts. Someone that calm put into a situation that chaotic had to break eventually. But he didn't. He showed up for post-game media like nothing happened. No slumped shoulders, no smirk. No bitterness, just a guy who looked like he wasn't surprised anymore by being underestimated. And then came the quote. "If I'm out there, I always wish for the ball to be in my hands, but it's not always about that. Sometimes it's a run call, sometimes it's a field goal, so I'd never go against whatever the play call was." That one sentence did something most quarterbacks can't pull off. It silenced attack and earned respect, all while not confirming a single thing. He never threw the coaching staff under the bus, never blamed decision-makers, even when everyone watching knew they had made the mistake. He made his point without even trying to prove one. Because what that quote really said wasn't about the play call, it was about the principle. The willingness to rise above chaos and still put team first. A refusal to bite back, even when handed the perfect excuse. And at that exact moment, something shifted. Shedeur wasn't being defined by the way he was treated anymore. He was defining himself through the way he responded. That kind of composure isn't just rare in the NFL, it's weaponized. Most rookies would have gone off script after being iced in a game where they had brought the team back. They would have taken a subtle jab, sent a cryptic tweet, stirred just enough drama for the reporters to eat. Shedeur? Nothing, just results, just accountability, just presence. And somehow, that quiet strength spoke louder than any touchdown could. NFL legends started weighing in. Not just current players, but people who had lived this life before, gone through the same politics. They saw it, they felt it, and they started calling it what it was, a masterclass in self-control. Because it was never just about his arm. It was about his identity, how he carried himself, how he refused to shrink to fit anyone's idea of what a young QB should look or act like. He was always too confident for those who wanted him humble, too vocal for those who wanted silence, too ready for a league hell-bent on making him wait. And yet here he was, proven, poised, and now untouchable. Because let's be honest, what do you do when the person you tried to expose exposes nothing in return? What do you do when a guy who you claimed was immature handles slander better than most 10-year veterans? What can you say? The shock of what was happening started catching up with the people who built the narrative. Not only had Shedeur passed every test thrown at him, both on and off the field, he had done it with grace under sabotage. That's not luck, that's fabric. It's what Coach Prime was referring to when he said, God prepared him for everything he's dealing with a lesser man would have folded. He wasn't talking about stats, he was talking about soul. Because real pressure doesn't just come from a one-score deficit in the fourth quarter. It comes when the people you're supposed to trust are secretly betting on your failure. When your coaching stumble under that. Shedeur, he made franchise history in the middle of it. And while Stefanski dodged media questions with vague answers, and the Browns pretended it was just a missed play, Shedeur's silence was growing louder by the hour. Because deep down, the league knows you can't coach that level of control. You can't teach it in a film room, and you definitely can't fake it in front of 60,000 fans waiting for you to break. You either have it or you don't. And what Shedeur showed on that podium with those few simple words was the exact trait they said he lacked: leadership under pressure. Not just with teammates, but within chaos. He had earned their trust without begging for it, earned the fans' love without pandering, earned the spotlight step by step without marketing tricks, brand deals, or network fluff pieces. Just ball, just class, just truth. Which, ironically, proved how silly every lie had become. The myth about him being too flashy. Not when he handled adversity like that. The claim that he lacked emotional maturity, not when he could have burned every bridge and chose not to. Too media-driven, that was their narrative, he never needed them. Because by now, the only thing left for the world to do was watch. Watch as Shedeur continued to lead, continued to win, continued to grow. And most importantly, it was never supposed to happen like this. A year ago, most draft boards didn't have Shadur Sanders in their top 10. Some didn't have him in their top 30. Analysts questioned if he was even NFL ready. A quarterback with clean tape, elite production, and NFL bloodlines was branded as a risk. Not because of talent, not because of physical tools, but because he didn't bow to the system on his way in. So the league watched as 31 teams passed on him, and the moment he was drafted, the stories didn't stop, they escalated, questioning his character, questioning his leadership, questioning everything except what he did when the ball was in his hands, because that was the one area nobody could touch. So instead, they came for the noise, distractions, attitude, image, anything that could slow the momentum of a player already positioned to break out. But they couldn't stop what happened next. Because after all the sabotage, the politics, the fake narratives, the numbers spoke. Shedeur came in with no first-team reps, no chemistry with starters. A locker room split by indecision, and a team led by a coach who couldn't even give a straight answer to a single post-game question. And still, in just 3 games, he did more than many safe picks had done all season. He didn't just show flashes, he took full control. And once the world realized what was happening, once everything Deion Sanders laid bare was backed by film, facts, and fire, the machine couldn't stop it. Because Shedeur didn't need ESPN to validate him. He didn't need legacy reporters or filtered press conferences. He didn't need an orchestrated faster than the league could contain. He became, without a doubt, the most searched athlete on the internet in 2025. Not just in the NFL, not just among rookies, across every sport. He pulled more traffic than Patrick Mahomes, more than Steph Curry. More than even LeBron James, who had held that top 3 status for over a decade. Even Shedeur Sanders made the list. It didn't happen because of hype. It happened because people were paying attention. They saw a story that wasn't being spoon-fed by networks or national coverage. They saw the tension, the injustice, the talent, and even more than that, they saw the restraint, the maturity under fire, the refusal to play victim even when the league tried to cast him as one. All Shedeur did was play, better than anyone wanted to admit. And all Coach Prime did was call out a campaign that had been hiding in plain sight. Because what Deion Sanders exposed, in 5 paragraphs and 1 viral post, was more than a defense of his son. It was a warning shot. He didn't use coded language. He didn't ask for fairness. He dropped receipts. And in doing that, he reminded the league of something they should have never forgotten. You don't get to control excellence. You don't get to rewrite greatness to fit your system. And when you try, people notice. That's why fans flooded social media. That's why ex-players started feeling bold enough to speak. That's why insiders broke silence. Because this wasn't just football anymore, it was the story of a young athlete refusing to break, even when the system had every intention of folding him early. They benched him. They doubted him. They hid reps from him, replaced him in crunch time, leaked nonsense off the record, created a blueprint built to weaken a player's spirit before his breakthrough ever got started. But it didn't work. And now they're out of excuses. Because while the Browns' coaching staff tried to steer the spotlight away, the internet dragged it right back. While networks padded excuses, fans created their own clips, shared their own compilations, compared side by sides of what the league said versus what the tape showed. The NFL always had a voice. But for the first time, Shedeur's voice was louder. And he didn't even have to say much. His game did the talking. His composure delivered the closing line. And his silence, when given every right to explode, only made them look worse. Stefanski's decisions are under review. The franchise's choice to sideline their most promising player in years is now exposed to millions, not as a strategic hiccup, but as a signal that something more intentional had been happening behind the scenes. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point all along. Because if you can't erase a player's talent, you try to control the narrative around it. But here's the thing about truth. Once it's out, it never goes back in the bottle. Every stat, every game-saving throw, every leadership moment caught on camera, every fan cheering Shedeur's name during home and away games, it's documented now. It's saved. It's out there forever. The only thing the league cares didn't come into the NFL as a typical rookie. He came in with expectations. He came in with haters. He came in with poison in the air, and still, he breathed fire. And now the world, not just sports fans, not just players, but the world finally knows the truth. They tried to control the story. They failed. Because this time, the story wrote itself. And it begins with the name Sanders.